examine from that approach ever. So let me just improvise my response to that. The first response that comes to my head. The first response that comes to my head would be that yes, Leni Riefenstahl's work is high art, and it's propaganda of the worst kind. It's Hitler's propaganda, and it'll be difficult for us to deny its position in cinema history and in its artistic history. It is indeed high art. D.W. Griffith's work is high art. Again, it would be impossible to remove its place in cinematic history and its work as bringing innovation and invention into cinema in a way that nothing else before did, while being completely racist, misogynistic, piece of crap. So it's so yes, of course, there is going to be invention and innovation. There is going to be, and what is high art? I mean, I'm also using a very intuitive definition, a very loosely defined way of looking at things here. Let's look at what is high art and what could probably not make it to the top echelons of being called high art. So this is how I see it. I think that there are art is memetic engineering. Art is a constantly evolving negotiation with means that have been produced by our species in the last few thousand years. Some of these memes, some of these ideas, some of these constructs have come to existence as a response to fixing immediate hunger, as a response to fixing immediate human needs. Immediate human needs of survival in a forest, in a savanna environment can essentially be broken down into reproduction and food mongering, into finding food, finding ways of sustaining with food, and finding mating partners to have sex with and reproduce. If you were to break down the essential activities of our species in a forest, in a savanna environment, it would be food and sex. Now, food and sex give pleasure. Well-being of kin gives pleasure. Food and sex really give a great amount of pleasure.
Food and procreation, not sex.
Yeah, I mean procreation, yes, food and procreation and seeing the progeny would also give pleasure, and sex would also give pleasure. Sex, whether leading to procreation or not, still would give pleasure. So yes, so these two activities have evolved to have the response system of producing pleasure and joy. Food, sex, well-being of kin, etc. And then there are a bunch of, I'm so sorry to go back to after every talk I'm asked by my friends, did you go 3 billion years in time? But it's impossible it's really impossible to be able to talk about art without talking about evolution, impossible to talk about evolution without talking about biology and where we come from. So we'll have to go 3 billion years back in time. But I'll take you through this as quickly as I can. Let me be as quick as possible with this. Let's look at a bacterium in a bowl of water, and the bacterium swims towards food, towards glucose. Now, the moment it comes in contact with even a molecule of acid, if you were to introduce a drop of acid in that bowl, and the moment the bacterium comes in contact with even a molecule of that acid, it will tumble around and start wading away from the origin of that molecule. If the molecule that came in contact was glucose, the bacterium will continue swimming in the direction it was swimming in. If the molecule came from another side, it would still tumble around and go in the direction of. So the bacterium will always swim towards food and swim away from possible destruction. Now, if you were to break down what is happening with the bacterium, I'm sorry, I'm going to try and link this to art as quickly as I can. What's happening to the bacterium is there is contact with the molecule, with the environment, contact that is perceived by its molecular construct. So there is perception, there is contact, there is perception. After perception, it takes this perceived molecule and runs it past its memory system. Now, a bacterium does not have any memory system it has acquired within a lifetime. Bacterium Bacteria do not form new memories, human beings do. But a bacterium has genetic memory, memory that it has inherited genetically. So it runs this perceived molecule against its entire memory system, and then at one point 2 lights blink and it goes, it's acid. There's recognition. So there's contact, there's perception, there is running past memory systems. So there is assessment, there is recognition. After recognition, there is a response, because there is recognition, and the recognition leads to an if-then program. There's an if-then program within the bacterium that has evolved through process of natural selection. And through this if-then program, the bacterium knows what its response needs to be. So if acid, tumble around and run for your life. If glucose, continue swimming in the direction of glucose. If then, or else. So there is a very simple if then or else program within the bacterium. So there is contact, perception, assessment, recognition, response assessment, and then response itself. Then there is response within the bacterium. If you were to logically break down, you don't even need to go to biology or science for this. You can just logically break down what's happening in the bacterium. Similarly, as natural selection evolves, more and more complex kinds of response systems evolve. More and more complex kinds of memory systems evolve. So the moment we go to a silkworm, the memory system becomes so complex that the silkworm knows not only 36 chemicals, it knows it has evolved responses to millions of chemicals. It has evolved responses to millions of circumstances. So a silkworm comes across a trail of pheromone, it smells a single molecule of pheromone, and the silkworm has a response that says, go on the trail. Now the silkworm does not need to know anything more than that, because you see, information is resource intensive. The more information we need to carry, the more hardware we need, the more food we need, the more metabolism, the more metabolical resources we need at our disposal, which is going to be very, very resource intensive. And life is always working at an optimization of creating packing more and more information in lesser and lesser of hardware. So how do you do that? You do that by creating symbols, by creating metaphors. You do not need to understand the whole gamut of things. You do not need to understand the whole map. You just need to know basic directions. If pheromone, go on the trail. If a molecule of acid, tumble around. You don't need to understand why you're tumbling around. You don't need to understand why is it that you're going on the pheromonal trail. It's only when the silkworm reaches at the end of the pheromonal trail, it finds a female silkworm and says, wow, this day is getting better and better. But it does not know right at the beginning that the female silkworm leaves behind a trail of pheromones every time it travels, so that the male silkworm can find it. So these are processes that have evolved through natural selection. Now, these processes in human beings, in complex life forms, in apes and primates, are codified in forms of intuition and emotions. Now, the moment I go into emotions, I come into the space of humanities, and the moment science and humanities meet, a lot of people start having alarm bells ringing in their head. But we have, let's accept that we have arrived at a time in the world and in our knowledge system as in our civilization, where we cannot hold these two away from each other anymore. These are lovers that were born to meet, and here they are. The science and humanities are the same thing. There is a continuum. There is a great continuum between the two. And we will, as philosophers, as social scientists, as future social scientists that I'm hopefully addressing right now, we'll have to engage with sciences. We'll have to engage with the inferences produced by neurosciences, by technology, by artificial intelligence, by evolutionary biology, by physics. We'll have to engage with the inferences and the conclusions provided by our scientifically thinking and scientifically curious colleagues in another knowledge system, and take these inferences on board and build our new constructs, build our new ways of looking at ourselves and our world and our societies from these inferences. So that is what we need to do. So coming back to high art, we have response systems, and I'll really I'm trying to pack in way too much. I'm like running thin on my information density here. But because I have this opportunity, I'm not going to let go of it. So V.S. Ramchandran, any of you have read V.S. Ramchandran already? V.S. Ramchandran readers here? Okay. Okay, compulsory reading for people, for inquirers of social sciences, for inquirers in anthropology or art or any nature of humanities, absolutely compulsory reading would be the neuroscientist V.S. Ramachandran. Because V.S. Ramachandran discovered in the last decade mirror neurons. Anybody here has come across the idea of mirror neurons? Yes, of course. Awesome. That's not bad because it's still transitioning into humanity. So mirror neurons. What are mirror neurons? When you witness somebody experience something, same neurons, the exact same neurons are being fired in both your brains. So if you see me being burned right now, the neurons that are fired up in my brain are exactly similar to the neurons that will get fired up in your brain, the observer's brain. At the same time, almost simultaneously, there will be another signal, another set of signals that will be going from my skin, the burnt area of my skin, to my brain, affirming the experience of burn, affirming what the damage to the cells. And almost simultaneously, almost in that nanosecond, there will be another signal that will be in your brain cancelling out the experience, that there is no damage being done to you. Now, why has evolution allowed for this to happen? The reason for that is there are so many responses, there are so many stimuli in the environment that warrant immediate responses, that warrant not even wasting that fraction of a second, and because of that, these systems have evolved within us. Now, art allows us to, and the reason I mentioned mirror neurons is again because it's connected to art in some way, but I'll really definitely recommend you to look at V.S. Ramachandran and the field that has really originated with V.S. Ramachandran and another academic called Semir Zeki, called neuroaesthetics. Understanding aesthetics, understanding our experience of art, which basically combines everything that we have done so far from cognitive sciences, that we have done in cultural sciences, in the idea of art, and the idea of memetics, everything put together from a neurological point of view. Please look through it. Coming back to the idea of high art. So what's high art and what's low art now? Low art is I think art that has been examined over and over again. Coding systems that have been examined over and over again and have lost any further value in any further re-examination. High art is building new coding systems, building new ways of experiencing the environment and finding fair responses to the stimuli in the environment is what happens in high art. High art is new inventions in memetic engineering, new ways of creating responses and in informing ourselves of the responses that we are capable of creating. I've thrown too many dots out there and I'm not joined these dots at all right now because I don't think I have enough time that, or even the question warrants me to join all these dots together. Take a longer thesis and probably come back for a lecture someday to kind of join these dots. But the idea of high art for me is informed by that paradigm. Is informed by the paradigm where high art is an extremely important and relevant innovation and invention in memetic engineering that is going to inform the way we live, the way we look at life, the way we live, the way we make our moral choices, the way we make our ethical choices, etc. And that is a function of and people who practice this little practice in this little who are workers in this little field called high art, I think are actually practitioners of engineering of that kind, whether they are themselves aware of it or not. And the reason low art is also because it's one reason, as I said, is that a lot of that examination is no longer relevant. A lot of it is also vestigial, like the wisdom tooth or the appendix. It's there, but it's not of any use to us anymore. And a lot of this is detrimental, again like the appendix, but the infected appendix. So a lot of our junk cinema is like junk food. It stimulates a response system in us that evolved during forest and savanna environments, but that response code in us is actually extremely detrimental to our well-being today. So that's really the broad
Well, that kind of makes me want to ask not just one but many more questions, but I presume I have to kind of take a back seat and allow the rest of the kids to kind of talk to you about what they feel like asking you.
Yeah.
I can carry forward with my questions later, so I throw it open to the house here.
I would like to ask you about your own creative process, and also, like, personally, also in terms of creating something, artists, writers, filmmakers, about what you were talking about how art is mimetic engineering. And like you said about your own process, that you're constantly being exposed to so many things, so many stimuli which we are somehow absorbing and responding to and synthesizing. And so how do you, in that thing, like, isn't there like some sort of a streamlining which is required in order for the creative process to come to like that line, in order for something to materialize, like, in very crude, simple terms?
In fact,
so how do you do that? Like, what is your strategy of doing that? What is the advice that you probably give?
I mean, that's absolutely true, and that's the first thought that occurs to me each time I go on a rant like that and don't do a good job of tying it up together, which I did right now. Because that came from a lack of rigor. I did not prepare myself for this answer, and hence I threw a lot of ideas and did not do a great job of making a good argument, you know, and convincing you of what I was trying to say. So rigor is an extremely important element in everything I'm saying. It's an extremely important part of the process. The process of rigorously taking all the data, taking all the information on the table, and then making the combinations, and combining the information, taking off that which is not necessary, taking off repetitions, taking off refrain, making the right kind of connections, looking for logical loopholes, looking for so rigor in logic also kind of extends itself to rigor in art, rigor in aesthetic, rigor in the images that you're creating. Are these images really a good way of translating what is being said into what needs to be felt? And that was really the most important part of my artistic process all these years, and continues to be the most important aspiration for me. The aspiration to present all this data that I was kind of sharing right now, to take all these inferences and make them intuitively accessible somehow. That really remains the most exciting challenge of art for me. That how do I make sure that Ibteda TISS becomes a film that runs in theatres in Ghatkopar East for 4 weeks? And that for me is like really as important as anything else, as finding the logical end of each conversation. And I think that comes only through allowing yourself a certain rigor, allowing yourself a discipline where you do not give in easily to the attractive, shiny epiphany that you are having, because your epiphany is not going to translate to other people's epiphanies if you do not apply the rigor of translation there. So I need to constantly look for metaphors, I need to constantly look for images, I need to constantly look for ideas, I need to look for ways of condensing all this information, all this data into extremely simple images. I need to condense all these ideas into an image as simple as a worm crawling precariously on a floor with feet stomping around it, and making the worms crawling even more precarious. It could be smashed by a passerby's foot any moment, and then a piece of stamp paper comes in its way and takes the worm and puts it on a plant. And for me, that moment comes as a climax, as a climactic understanding and epiphany of a lot of ideas I've put together in the mixer, and then just like churned and rigorously. And I'm not even claiming that that's the most rigorous outcome that could have come out of it, but it still has come from some amount of rigor.
Do you consciously leave out something, or how do you make up your mind when all these inferences are there?
I leave out only repetitions. I leave out if I think that I've already engaged with an idea or an experience and don't need to engage with this experience again within the framework of a film, then I would leave it out. I would try not to leave out anything otherwise.
Sreja.
Hi, I have a question.
Please, start. Can you see you? Yeah. So you mentioned when you're talking about the prophecy for revolution that you wanted it to be crowd-funded because you wanted to maintain a certain neutrality. So my question is that as a documentary